in January of 2021, inflation was at 1.4%. By December of 2021, it had risen to 7%, a five-fold increase. Now, since the war in Ukraine began in late February, the rate of inflation has risen incrementally, another 1.6%, to a current level of 8.6%. So again, from 7% to 8.6%. Given how inflation has escalated over the past 18 months, would you say that the war in Ukraine is the primary driver of inflation in America?
No, inflation was high before, certainly before the war in Ukraine broke out.
That was Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty getting the truth from Federal Reserve Chairman Jay Powell this week during Powell's Wednesday testimony in front of the Senate Banking Committee. As we know, the Democrat spending bonanza in 2021 stoked inflation, helping to send costs of everyday goods to 40-year highs. Joining me right now is the man himself, Tennessee Senator Bill Hagerty. He's a member of the Banking, Appropriations, and Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, good morning to you. Thanks very much for being here, and great work on the panel this week. I want to get to the activity of the weekend in a moment and the Supreme Court decision, but first I want to get your take on the economic issues. And here's a question for you, because Bloomberg is reporting this morning that at the G7, Germany is pushing back on the European Union's green agenda. Joe Biden says he's doing everything he can to get inflation down. Germany is pushing the G7 nations to walk back a commitment that would halt the financing of overseas fossil fuel projects by the end of the year. This is according to Bloomberg this morning. And yet Biden says he's doing everything he can to get inflation down. How do you see it?
Well, it doesn't surprise me at all that Germany is taking this posture. Look, they foolhardily went in and they killed their nuclear energy. They got way over their skis in this green agenda, and they've realized that it doesn't work. They're going back to reopening coal-fired plants right now. And by the way, Maria, Germany never met its obligations under the Paris Climate Accord. America exceeded our obligations, even though we pulled out of it. So I think Germany is acknowledging the harsh reality that these green policies do not work. The technology isn't there. And it's inherently inflationary, and it's made a huge national security issue for Germany, for all of Europe, and it's happening right here at home as well. When Biden talks about inflation here, and he's doing all he can, what he's done is wage a regulatory war on American industry, particularly on the oil and gas industry. And by suppressing supply with all of these regulations, by killing any incentive to invest, at the same time, massive stimulus spending that we saw come through in that March 2021 bill. You know, you're compressing supply, you're increasing demand. There's only one way to go. That's prices have to go up. And this has been unprecedented. 40-year highs in terms of inflation right now. And if you look beneath those numbers, Maria, it's accelerating.
Well, you also have the timeline that shows exactly the point that you made to Jay Powell, that inflation really started stoking after the president's COVID relief package in March of 2021. We've got the inflation rate timeline, and we see what has taken place. He walked into office, and on day one, canceled the Keystone XL pipeline, signed in the COVID relief bill in March, signed in an infrastructure bill in November. And, of course, the Democrats were pushing their $5 trillion spending package throughout. Jason Smith in the House, the ranking member in the budget, told us hundreds of billions of dollars went out in the last couple of weeks to states, and they haven't even appropriated that money yet. So he's expecting inflation to get worse. Your thoughts on where this is going?
That's true. Inflation is still in the pipeline because these funds have not yet been spent. So there's more stimulus dollars sitting in these state coffers that are getting ready to pile into the economy again. And the Biden administration will not take its foot off of American industry. More regulations, more constraints, and particularly when it comes to our energy policy. Maria, you and I have talked about this before. Biden waged war on the American industry and energy industry from the day he came into office. That's had the effect not only to drive energy prices through the roof. You think about what's going to happen this 4th of July, empty tanks, empty wallets, largely due to the increase in energy cost here in America. But it's had a broader effect on energy prices on a global basis. And that's had the impact of benefiting Vladimir Putin. We're inadvertently funding his war on Ukraine. This has got to stop.
Well, this is exactly what a source just wrote me. He said Biden's war in Ukraine is currently financed by the United States. $100 oil provides Putin $1 billion a week. We are also financing the Ukraine government by spending $1 billion a month in military arms. This is the first time the U.S. has financed both sides of a war. He says this is Biden's war.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I'm pleased to see more and more people coming out and talking about this harsh reality. Again, Biden is pursuing this theology of green energy, and he's doing this without any regard to the real consequences. And again, he's causing massive inflation here at home, and he's putting us in a position where we've got war happening in Europe thanks to these backward-looking policies.
Well, what is going on with the oil industry? Because I've spoken with a number of investors who say, look, they're under pressure to show the Securities and Exchange Commission that they're investing with ESG as their North Star. Chevron wrote a letter to the president and basically said, look, we're doing all that we can, and yet we continue to produce as much as we can, given in the face of, pushback from this administration. The CEO of Chevron writes, Chevron produced the highest volume of oil and gas in our 143-year history. And in the first quarter, we had 1.25 million barrels a day. And yet we continue to get the energy sector needs cooperation because we continue to get pushback from this administration. So what is going on in terms of this industry? They've completely changed their businesses, Senator.
I know, and you think about the investments that have to be put in place to continue to maintain supply here in America. These are 10-year investments, multi-billion-dollar investments, and CEOs and boards of these large energy companies can't follow their fiduciary duty if they know that the Biden administration has declared that by 2030, in 8 years, they want to see an end to the fossil fuel industry. So this is a terrible environment for investing in continued capacity. You look at what Biden's EPA has recently done with the small refinery exemptions. They've gone back and retroactively withdrawn 2018 small refinery exemptions and imposed retroactive billion-dollar fines on these small refineries. They're going to go out of business. So we're constraining supply at every point. There's no surprise that prices are going through the roof, and we're making ourselves far more vulnerable. So now Joe Biden's talking about going to the Middle East to genuflect before the UAE and Saudi Arabia to get them to pump more. He's even sent a team down to Venezuela to deal with Maduro, an international terrorist and a killer. He's working on the Iran deal again. And you look at Biden, he's looking at these international killers and terrorists. He's looking to other countries that may not have our best interest at heart. He'd rather make us more dependent on them than look right here in our own backyard where we could launch a resurgent domestic energy production. We could actually come to the aid of our allies, increase our own national security, and make us better allies for them as well.
Well, Senator, I'm glad your emergency funding bill to protect the SCOTUS judges passed the Senate on Wednesday, but Pelosi is sitting on the legislation in the House.
Yes.
We'll see if it comes to the floor for a vote. Senator, thanks very much for joining me this morning.
Maria.
Bill Hagerty.